I got the area.
Somebody's going to take it. I'm not sure. He doesn't know all of it.
You gonna send him my name?
Yeah, well, good joke.
I'll sit on the break.
And actually,
I might want to say, hey, hi Michael, how are you?
Hi, Mom.
I'm in Saturday.
You there?
Hello, Bruce. Thanks for coming in.
we're not making jokes about everybody's each other.
I'm just trying to.
I want like a rural like a rural Ontario thing. Somebody's coming home, somebody's coming to get slimmer and slimmer as we go in. But I work here. Yeah, I work here at the station, so now I live in Wakefield. But I own a property in Gracefield, so I'm kind of like trying to find spots where I can be in between the two. This is a really cool spot. Just honestly, it's like there's so much to see. They want to do really great with the space, so I'm in. Yeah, absolutely. I wish. Honestly, that's the next thing. That's my next purchase. Absolutely. What about yourself? Where are you from? You're from Wakefield.
Can you tap on Donnie's shoulder? Donnie? In front of you?
Okay, my son too. Really? Manitic. Neck tap. That's all the area.
We're on the river. South of where the golf course is. No,
Well, it is. My grandparents have a spot right, or did. My late grandparents had a spot right next to the river, like right
in the Manatee, that's pretty back of that.
area. And we used to jump off the bridge right into the river. And just like they did in Wakefield, right? Yes.
Right.
That was our rival high school, actually. South Carlton High School was our rival. I went to St. Mark's, so it was the Catholic high school versus the public high school. What's that? St. Mark's right in Madison, but like way on the outskirts. We had like cow fields and nothing around us. And South Carlton was in Metcalfe.
Did you ever run into a couple of brothers? Steve.
They were twins.
We did a
And were they twins? Okay. No, I haven't. Amazing. You might come up in conversation later. Chances are.
Slowly getting rid of it.
You got a good day.
What is the color? Okay, cool. There you go. You might be as strong as are you sure there's an extra one.
I'll let somebody sit down and stand up to win. The last thing I want to
How is it gone? Oh my goodness.
Just give it a couple of I told him he's sitting in the corner and he's his story.
I'm looking forward to your April talk. Real historian here.
Yeah, now we've got about 35 of them out of print because I've been handing them.
But when are they half for some?
Like Richard Thompson, who was the guy with the Victoria Cross,
Oh, okay.
Victoria Scarf, Queen Scarf, who was buried at Chelsea Pioneer Cemetery. So we'll sit beside Brian for a minute because I'm going to get him some wine.
I'm sitting right in front of him.
Okay.
Wait for him. I'll get talking to him.
Okay, I'm just going to get him have a story.
I need to squeeze light if I could. Sorry about that.
He's cool.
One more time.
That's the last time.
You know, like how the street each like what was it like to grow up?
Maybe to start. I think it's starting at 7. Okay, we did. That's it. I did. I thought it was 6:30. Yeah, it's 6:30 to 7 reception. That's good.
Yeah, that's how like you
She's taking I think it's a whole year. And we've got a place for her. She can do a year. Whatever that is. In Anglesey. can't remember that. But I was studying. I was part of it in guilty. One year leave of
Nice to see that there's a reason to be there that you don't want.
I used to go, when I was in Manchester at college, we used to go rock climbing. Got to know all the pubs in Gatineau and Ballentyne. In those days, when an English person walked in, the old men who were talking Welsh to each other stopped and spoke English to them. I went back a few years later with my brothers, and when the Englishmen walked in, they spoke Welsh louder.
Yes, wasn't it?
And by that time, of course, you become bilingual. What was silent was Welsh. It was amazing. The difference, night and day, 30 years ago. Oh, really? Now those people, when I was working on the boat, they visited you.
After all that, I forgot to bring his water.
Remember that? So now we know you don't get a chance to talk about Wales.
To the farm. Then she went to they got it. She was in Paris.
Yeah, just here, I'll get by you, let you in.
Novelty bag, I suppose.
No, it wasn't. New blade full.
I have a funny story about this. My brother gave me a memoir. I'm in the giant tiger in Ottawa last week. Not that too well. Looking for something. They have a big selection. Oh my God, it's cool. That's a hard thing. Girl account 20-year-old.
Probably not done yet.
Oh, she said, that's an event I always want, pointing to my hat, that's an event I always want to go to. The 20-year-old in Ottawa, never should know about the YouTube, or whatever, and they're on YouTube. Well, there was a line of people.
He said they'll be figured out at 9:10. Well, we've got a couple of them playing hockey down there. Yes. It's only a few hours to Story of my life. I think it was really alright. Yeah, I could have said, might have been the Shamrock one.
like, what, an hour climb?
Right over the water
Yes.
Me too.
On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Gatineau Valley Historical Society, I want to welcome everyone here this evening, those here in person at this historic train station, as well as those following us on Facebook live stream on the Gatineau Valley Historical Society Facebook page. I now will introduce Mark, who's going to come and do the land acknowledgement.
Folks, good to see everyone. As you all know, we've just entering our 60th year as a historical society, and we've been thinking of ways to sort of give ourselves a new direction and a new focus. And you may have been aware recently that we now have Gilbert Whiteduck as our president for the Historical Society, Jan Cindy. And one of the things he's influenced us about is that we have a land acknowledgement at all of our meetings. So I'd like to start the meeting by doing that. So we pay respect to the Anishinaabe and Algonquin people who are the traditional guardians of this land. We acknowledge their long-standing sacred relationship with this territory, which is unceded. The ancestral territory along the Tenegandino Zibi, or the Gatineau River like we call it, has served as a travel route, location for villages, site of meetings and exchanges amongst visiting nations. We acknowledge the traditional knowledge keepers and the courageous leaders, past, present, and future. We pledge to honor and respect the Anishinaabe Algonquin nations.
We are quite fortunate to be in this building this evening. A vast amount of people have memories, either when they were getting on the train or disembarking it, and or memories from their family from many years ago, or when visiting the myriad of families who have lived in this station. We would be amiss if we did not take some time to pay homage to the many families who made this their home. We are fortunate to have some of the GVHS board members here tonight, notably Mark Cockburn, Louise Schwartz, Cindy Duncan McMillan, Linda Bardell, just in the kitchen. As Mark mentioned, Gilbert Whiteduck is unfortunately not able to be with us tonight as he had a previous commitment. Those board members joining us on Facebook live stream are Francis Curry, the Vice President, Eric Rask, Toby Sanger, and Shirley Brown. A huge thanks to the Be and Become organization for hosting this event, and especially Sam Maloney, wherever Sam is.
I'm behind the phone.
Okay, the coordinator, and audiovisual personnel Danielle Rudenberg and Philip St. Jean. They've been instrumental working with us in organizing this event. And I will now ask Sam to come and say a few words regarding the Be and Become organization.
Thank you, Stella. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this tiny little space, but historically relevant. Am I right? Like, that's why we're all here. Is that this space has held so much history, has really had a huge impact on our community, and is really the reason all of us live here today. And so it's very important that we do such events in such a space. In future, we will find a bigger space and probably make this a spot along the way for everyone. So great turnout. I'd like to thank those who are joining us by remote because of the limited space in this event. We have a live stream going on Facebook, so thank you for everyone joining us from home. Few thank yous. Thank you, Della, the charity, for approaching us with this opportunity, because we are going to invariably make community connections here, which will be really imperative to our mandate, the thing that we're here for, which is for youth in the community to have community connections and end up having a better ability to stay in this area, right? Rather than moving to the city and losing connections with their area that they moved into or were grown up into. Mark Cockburn, thank you so much for providing us with this with the projectors and the screen. Linda Bardell, thank you so much for delivering the extra chairs that were needed for the presentation. Thank you so much. Daniel Rudenberg and Phil St. Jean for the technical expertise in putting together the live stream and the projector and everything. Thank you to our students who baked the yummy, delicious goods for everyone to partake in. Thank you so much. And of course, to our head speaker, Bruce, who has a wealth of knowledge to share with us this evening. Thank you so much. A bit about Be and Become. Our mission here is to provide a space and resources for youth to develop and support community-based activities and encourage youth to youth engagement in their own community and leadership opportunities. Our first activities started in CAS. I'm getting ahead of myself. Which gave rise to our first Skills Link project, which was an important step in developing youth connectivity to their area. It was an opportunity to provide training and mentorship opportunities with their community to give unemployed youth an opportunity to gain the skills that they needed to have gainful employment in this area and stay here rather than move to the city. And just to be able to use this space, right? We were registered as a not-for-profit organization in 2017, and the train station was donated to us in that same year by the successions of Charles and Gerald Rooney. It was signed by our current president of the board, who's here with us tonight, Kevin Morris. There on the stairs, he's using the stairs, and Angèle Gagnon, another board member, who really were pivotal in gaining this space and using it for youth operations. And Daniel Gagnon, who was our director at the time. Let me find my spot. And at that time, the Low municipality actually donated us $4,500 to pay off the existing taxes and make this place a viable place for youth activities. So the youth activities continued in CAS at the library and in different locations, but stopped due to COVID. COVID happened, but in that time, in those few years, we were able to continue with their necessary renovations that were needed to make this space a community space and open to the public. And now, the Venosta train station, it operates as the regional youth resource center for the area. In 2022, when restrictions were lifted, we started a second Skills Link project. Skills Link project meaning a place where a young, unemployed youth can come learn necessary life skills and be able to find a pathway towards employment and be able to stay in our area rather than moving away to find employment elsewhere. The interests of the participants in the NEEF project developed our need for a digital media studio, which you're welcome to go and check out. It's upstairs. It has, we were able to buy necessary equipment for a media studio, meaning a digital camera and different things, sound panels for the walls and microphones and different things to be able to make the youth actually more accessible to the outside world and be able to stay in our area. Pages. And editing software so that we could start an AV program, an audio visual program where youth can learn to use that equipment to further their skills in entrepreneurial, and being honest, they all use that equipment anyways, right? They use it and they're isolated as a result of it. But if they could use that equipment in a collaborative way here in our station, then they could understand how to use it in a ultimately useful way where they can learn to use it for their own purposes, if whatever they happen to be, if they happen to have this or that interest, artistic interest and such. I'm getting ahead of myself. So through the Digital Media Center, it has given rise to this idea of the Gatineau Valley Voices, okay? Where youth in the Gatineau Valley, growing up here, like so many of you have, it can be a collaboration of artwork and writing and audio-video productions. We have given rise to a newsletter where we will, with the talents of the students, we can put out a newsletter by students, for students, and the greater community, to just give a voice to students of the Gatineau Valley. On that note, I would love it if you could sign our guest book, because here if you add your name to the email list, you will get a copy of our monthly newsletter, which the first issue is set to be launched in the first week of April, with student writers, student photographers, student, we have a painter, we have a group who are going to put together a comic series, like a comedy sort of graphic design thing, and they have all kinds of ideas, these students. If you would like to sign our book and add your name to the list, we would love that. Also, so on that note, if you have stories of growing up here yourselves, which I've seen that many of you do, I've been reading your comments on the Facebook posts and things like that, and it's very interesting. I would like to start a new series of compilations of what it is like to grow up in the Gatineau Valley. Past, present, future, maybe, right? And if you have such a story, I would love to hear it. So please, if you sign our guest book, just make a check mark beside your name, and I will contact you for your story about the area. Thank you so much. And without further ado, I will pass the stage to our presenter for the evening. Thank you so much, Bruce.
Just a second, Bruce.
Okay.
Oh,
Hang on. Okay, thank you, Sam. So
Thank you so much.
before we move on to the presentation, I just want to mention. Oh,
thank you, Sam.
thank you, Sam. Just to mention before we move on to our talk, just to mention a couple upcoming events we have going on at the Historical Society. So on Tuesday, April 25th at the St. Mike's High School gym, Don Keeley and I are going to be doing a presentation based on what we call the Poggin Falls albums. So these are a series of albums that Don discovered at the Core Museum, and we've managed to put them into a presentation, and we're going to add in maps and Google Earth and all sorts of stuff to show the story of what the river looked like before the dam was built. So you can find that information on our website. So far we're not talking about streaming it live, but we may end up doing that. And then the other event that we have coming up is on June 3rd. We're actually organizing a bus excursion up to the Kittagans-Zimbabwe traditional powwow. So that'll be a bus leaving somewhere in Old Chelsea around 10 o'clock, and then working its way up to Kittagans-Zimbabwe for the afternoon for taking the powwow as well. So again, that more information will be on our website fairly soon. Okay, so other than that, I think we're going to do our launch day up to Gatineau sometime in late June, maybe at the Fairburn House, that's the other thing too. And also to mention that if you want to take a look at our publications and think about joining the Historical Society, you can do that over there. So without further ado, I'll definitely pass the floor over to Louise, who will introduce that first.
Okay, so I'll go very quickly, Bruce. I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to introduce Bruce, who is here with his two sons, Neil and Kevin. Can you just let us know where you are, Neil and Kevin? No, nice to meet you guys. Bruce has been a long-time member of the GVHS and has enthusiastically supported our mission in a multitude of ways, and you know what they are, including giving talks like this on train history. I think this is his third talk. Most importantly for me, at least, as editor of Up the Gatineau, he is a 6-time contributor to Up the Gatineau, and incredibly, for someone so young, his first article appeared in 1977 in Volume 3, and we're now about to release Volume 49. So that tells you about his longevity. It was a short piece about 2 of his enduring loves, the train and the Blue Sea Lake area.
And his kids, too.
And his kids. Oh, yeah. All of Bruce's articles are here for sale tonight. We pulled them all out. There's all 6 volumes, so please drop by our publication table at the end to check them out. Bruce tells us his interest in railways was nurtured as a child by visits to the village of Messine to watch the train come in and pick up the mail. This village is close to Blue Sea Lake, where Bruce has cottaged his entire life. He's been a member of the Bytown Railway Society since it formed 50 years ago in 1969. You're getting older. Has written multiple articles for its magazine Branch Line and is on its editorial board. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Bruce Ballantyne.
Thank you, Louise. She mentioned I've had a long history with the Gatineau Valley, and not only interested in trains, but also just interested in history generally. So, of course, being up the Gatineau in the summer a lot, I took an interest in the history in the Gatineau Valley. So here I am, and of course, she says a particular interest in trains generally. So we'll get started. I should say too that I have to confess, in all the years, and there are quite a few, I have never been in one of these stations. This is the first time. These were designed for the original railway builder, and I'll come to that in a minute. And the architect was Edgar Berryman. And railways did that a lot. Then they used one architect, they designed one station, and they could sort of just like a kit, boom, boom, put them up all along the railway line. He built the man who finally started this line also had other railway lines in Quebec, one up the Laurentians. And you'll see even today there's still stations that are preserved there that look very similar to this one. So there are quite a few of them around, but I'm sure he'd be very happy, Berryman, to see what's happened to this station, that it survives, which is great. Oh. I guess just, oh, that's right, the space bar. Yeah. Anyway, here's what I'm going to talk about. We're trying to look at what life was like for everybody, the people who worked for the railway and the public that had to deal with the railway and use the railway. I'll give a brief outline of the history. I think a lot of you have read or have heard about the history of the railway line from various articles and what have you. And then working on the railway, all the different people, and there were a lot that mostly men that worked on the railway. The station agent, the people, the men, usually men, or 99% of the time men, that operated the stations, kept the stations and what have you. Maintenance of the track, that's the guys who would maintain the tracks, the ballast, clear and what have you. And then I might not go into that one, but the hazards of working for the railway. And then the public and the railway. That's what you'll be particularly interested in, because you want to know about how the public dealt with the railway, how the railway dealt with the public. So let's go into the history to start with. It all started in 1871 when several local businessmen in Hull primarily, and one or two in Gatineau, organized or incorporated the Ottawa and Gatineau Valley Railway. And it was authorized to build from Hull to the Desert River, Maniwaki. Alonzo Wright was one of them, as was Joseph Courier. He was an Ottawa gentleman. and Ibieti. Everybody's heard of Ibieti. So now before the railway, you got up here on by stagecoach, and I remember an article in up the Gatineau about a doctor took his daughter to Maniwaki. It took him 3 days with stopovers and several places along the way. I can't remember what places they were, but anyway, it took a long time. So when people heard about the coming railway, they were really, really pleased to hear that, obviously. And here's an ad that was put in a paper for various stagecoach lines, and it went all the way to the Desert River, so it didn't call it Maniwaki back then. And so in 1882, something started. They had an official sod turning, and some other well-known people were there, and some of them changed, and they actually used a silver shovel, spade. Now this is actually, I've always wondered what happened to it, and I found this article that a ticket seller at the CP in the Ottawa Union Station, the old station downtown, had the ownership of it. So, but I don't know what's happened to it since. But I bet it's around somewhere. I sure love to know where it is. But that would be really, really interesting. Finally, in about 1887, a gentleman named Horace J. Beamer. He was a financier, a railroad builder. He built some of the other railways, the one I just mentioned, up the Laurentians, and hence the common station design. He finally got things going and raised the money to start building the railway up to Maniwaki, actually. Well, so construction started. Now this is not this area. This is another area, and of course you see the Gatineau line wasn't this straight, so you obviously can tell that it's not other than around Casabajua. So anyway, they finally got started, and a lot of hard labor and what have you. And finally, in 1895, they reached Gracefield. And at that point, work stopped. Beamer was still involved. A couple of their chief engineers, they always had a chief engineer when they're building railway. And one of the descendants of W. Dale Harris still has a cottage at Blue Sea Lake. And he was the chief engineer. W. Dale Harris was the chief engineer for a few years until they reached Gracefield. And the railway grew in terms of business, and CP took over in 1902. It had become the Ottawa Northern and Western Railway, and it was combining of the Gatineau Valley Railway and the railway line to Waltham, and it became one railway company, still under Beamer. And CP took it over in 1902 for a 999-year lease. That's what they used to do back then. The big railways would lease it for 999 years. And so they took over. They finished the railway to Maniwaki, and the first passenger train to Maniwaki was February of 1904. And from then it grew and grew and grew and grew till at this time in 1926. You can see there's a heck of a lot of trains. Am I in your way there?
No, fine.
There were a heck of a lot of trains running. They even had a commuter service to Alcove by that time. They had, in the summer, they had a train that only went to Casabajua. And plus they had all the other trains that went the whole way. And then at this end here is the freight. Now this is a employee's timetable. Every employee was issued a timetable that was in the operating, and the agents would have received one too. And this shows there, it's because there's a whole bunch of extra stuff, including these letters here are the, I'll tell you about this later, are the letter designations for each station, the telegraph letter designations. So anyway, so you can see how busy it was back then. And that was about the peak. After that, it was all downhill as far as how busy it was. So let's look at working on the railway. For the train, we'll look at the operating employees. They're the ones that ran the train. And you look at the two at the front of the train in the engine, what they call the head end crew. They'd be the fireman and engineer. It was hot work, particularly in the summer, and cold in the winter when you had one of the open cab locomotives where there was nothing other than a curtain behind you. And that was the backhead, as they called it, all the gauges and what have you, and this is where the coal went in. Now this one was a stoker fired. The fireman didn't have to do anything, but most of them that came up here were hand fired, so he had to shovel. And going up the Mile Hill, he had to shovel hard. So it was hot, sweaty work in the summer. I was actually part of the service crew for 1201. The Bytown Railway Society provided the service crew at the museum to start up the engine, get it ready. And we got to ride on it. So I got to do a cab ride in the hot summer, and I wasn't even doing any work. I wasn't shoveling. Boy, was it hot. With that whole back head there would be hot with the fire in behind and the boiler up here. Anyway, so it was hot work, and it was tough. Now, some of the responsibilities of the head-end crew was to put coal in the engine. And I'll show you in a minute, there's another greasing around the locomotive. Maniwaki had a really weird, normally when you think of coaling a locomotive, you think of the big tower and then the chutes come down and all that. But some of the smaller branch lines had these buckets, big, huge buckets. A local person would fill them, and then the fireman would have the job of hoisting them up with a pulley, I presume, and then bring them up, swing them over. There was a swinging bar there, swinging them over and then dumping them in. That was his job, summer and winter, so he could be freezing cold and up on the tender, and plus the fact that he had to get the water. So that's the water tank that was at Blue Sea Village Station. So the firemen, they would go in there, and the fireman would lower the spout. And a friend of mine, I'll tell you in a minute, recalls, he was a fireman, recalls in the winter, it didn't work too right and it spilled all over him. He just about froze until I got back into the cab. He was glad to be in the cab. So, you know, it wasn't an easy job for the fireman. And there's an example of the spout, what they call a standpipe. He's filling it up there. Fortunately for him, it was the summer. And another job they had to do is to grease. And there's lots of fittings and what have you on a steam locomotive to have to. So, some of that was handled by a crew that they had at the terminus, like in Maniwaki would be at the engine shed, so they'd have locals to do some of that, but not always. This is Maniwaki, and you can barely see that coal loading thing there. And this is the bunkhouse for the head end crew, the firemen and in Maniwaki, you had your head end crew, which was the fireman fireman and engineer, and then you had your train crew or brakeman on a freight train. They call it the train crew. On a passenger, you would see him be in uniform along with a conductor, and they'd help you and what have you. The freight brakeman would sleep in the caboose. They had bunks in there, and they had a potbelly stove, and they had a cook stove, and what have you. That's where they'd sleep. The head-end crew would sleep in the bunkhouse. And I didn't know this until somebody told me, that my friend, who's deceased now, was a fireman, that the passenger crew slept on the passenger cars. They didn't, CP didn't provide, they were cheap. They didn't provide any hotel accommodations back then. Anyway, the bunkhouse was a terrible place, and I'll do a quote here from this friend of mine that had been a fireman. I thought I'd quote what he says about this place here. It had 4 upper and lower bunks made from the usual pipe and pipe fittings. Someone hired locally changed the sheets and pillowcases. In winter, a single bedroom could be very cold, especially if the door connecting to the bedroom and kitchen was closed to the stove where the kitchen, in the kitchen. The place had little or no insulation in the walls. The kitchen had the usual large coal-fired cook range which heated the place, winter and summer. Each night there were 2 engine crews. So that's why the double bunk beds. Because you had both the passenger and freight train. And they'd lay overnight. And that was one of the things, is the time they had spent up there. And I'll come to that in a minute. Anyway, so that's how he described it. Now, there was no showers or anything like that. So you're the fireman and the locomotive engineer. You're coming up and you're hot. And for the fireman doing all the coal shovel, he'd be all sweaty and you know. So I guess he just washed in the sink. There was nothing. So great life. So anyway, now this is a picture of some of the crew back then. Now this is, some of you know this guy, I've heard of him, William McFall. He was in 2 accidents. The second one killed him. First one, he lost a leg, but he kept on being a locomotive, and that's him with his prostheses, obviously showing it off. I understand from what I've heard, he was one tough guy, and he lasted, well, until his accident in 1911, geez, it's escaping right now, 1911, just south of Farleton, when there was a washout, and the locomotive went right into that, and he stayed with the locomotive to put the brakes on, and he lost his life at age 61. So he could have retired by that time, but I guess he loved the work, as many of them did. But anyway, most of the crew, or all the crew, were from Ottawa. So they lived in Ottawa. Their families were in Ottawa, out down near the Ottawa West Yard, where they call Bayview Station for the LRT now. That's where the roundhouse was. And so they go up, the passenger train, the freight train will go up in the morning. Sorry, they go up, the freight train will go up in the morning. It would take all day because they drop off cars and pick up cars and what have you. They go and take all day to get there and arrive sometime, I don't know, supper time or later. Certainly too late to come back. And of course the passenger trains were usually around 5 or 5:30 in the afternoon. They get up to Maniwaki around 8:30, 9 o'clock. So obviously they couldn't go back down, so they stay overnight. So a lot of and they go back to Ottawa the next day, and they go right back out the next evening. And so guess where they slept all the time? So they really, I don't know why they liked it, but they, a lot of them did. Even my friend who quit and got a job as, get this, as an air traffic controller, the way he talked, he loved it. And I don't know why. Anyway, so a lot of them did, and some of them, including McFall and another gentleman who operated the last passenger train, Bill Austin. This is the route he wanted. So I guess they liked the slower pace. I don't know, because it was slower. So anyway, that just shows you some of the crew, and of course William McFall. I'll come to him a little more later on. Now another part of the train was the railway post office workers. This is a typical RPO, Railway Post Office car. They were employees of the post office, not the railway. And their responsibility was to sort the mail, have it ready for the next stop where there was mail. This Venosta would have been one of them. I don't know where the post office was. To offload the bags and pick up the bags and what have you. So, and of course, this is CN. I didn't have a picture up the Gatineau, but this, you can see them loading and unloading the mail into bags. I remember at Messines, there was 2 post offices, one for Messines and one for Bouchette, because the tracks didn't go near Bouchette. And the guy from Bouchette would come every evening to pick up his mail, the postmaster, and load it in the back of his old roundy car that he had. I can remember it in my mind. And the bags of mail, and he'd actually leave the trunk open because it was just too much. Why he didn't get a truck, I don't know, but anyway. I remember him doing that, and then this is when I really got interested. We'd then wait for the mail to be sorted, and we'd go get our mail after they quickly sorted at the post office, which is just across the street. So anyway, that's, and you could always, if you're last minute, you forgot to leave it at the post office, there was a slot in the mail car, and you could put it in there. And it was an official post office on the train, because they could frank or cancel the mail. And here's some examples. Now this goes way back, because you can see here ONGV, although it's it looks like 1906. So they still had the old Ottawa and Gatineau Valley stamp that they were using. This is more recent, 1949. They're both 49. They said Ottawa Maniwaki. So that's what they did. The route, Ottawa Maniwaki or Ottawa Waltham, RPO. That's what they had. So if you put a mail in the slot, it would get stamped. And here's the inside of the mail car. You can see the pigeonholes here, and the bags. And if you can imagine particularly in the Gatineau line. They're going back and forth like this, and he's trying to throw the letters in the pigeonholes. I don't know how they did it. And I would think that they would have to if they got one. I'm not sure how they did this, but if you think of how close the various communities are that would have a post office, I'm not sure they were able to sort it fast enough between, say, Low and Venosta. I mean, the train was slow coming up here, but not that slow. So I'm not sure or they just took it all to Maniwaki, sorted it, and then on their way down they'd throw it out in the bag. Not throw it, but drop it out in the bag. So I don't know. Anyway, despite that, they sometimes did some sorting while they were waiting. Okay, now let's look at the other station agent, and I'll move on here. I haven't used these very much, which is probably just as well. Anyway, he was I'll show the one here. These are the two lads at Wakefield, the old Wakefield station where the turntable is, and that station was the same design as this one. And this was, I'll just tell you, there was a dispute. This is the ORT, the Order of Railway Telegraphers. It's a union of telegraphers. And there was a dispute. So even the guys in Wakefield had their signs for their dispute with the railway. So anyway, anyway, the agent was the link between the community and the railway and sometimes the outside world. Before we had telephones, guess how you communicated, or other than the mail, slowly. You communicated with the outside world. You did telegraph. Guess who sent the telegraph for you? So they were a link to the outside world. And let's see. Now, up the Gatineau as well, elsewhere, most of the larger stations had a station agent, but a few of them didn't. They had what they call caretakers. And later on, Farm Point, Cascades, and this place here only had a caretaker. They couldn't sell tickets. They'd open the station, or might have lived in it. This station had a section foreman. I'll come to who that is in a minute. Had a section foreman that lived here. So he acted also as caretaker, so he could help passengers on and off and what have you, but he didn't sell tickets. So if you got on the train here in Venosta, you'd have gotten on the train and the conductor would have sold you a ticket. So conductors could sell tickets. And they give you a special slip with that they punched. So anyway, now, what did he do? Did a lot of paperwork. Besides selling tickets and sending telegrams, did a lot of paperwork and bookkeeping. This is a passenger ledger from the New York Central Railroad. I don't have one for up here, but I found this in the old Berwick station north of Cornwall, on the old New York Central that came into Ottawa. This is 1912. So this, I'm sure it was very similar to this, and you don't have to look at all the details, but you can see this was a passenger count. How many got on, how many got off, and what have you, how many tickets you sold, what have you. And then, of course, you didn't just have passengers. He had to look after all the freight. And this is the freight ledger for the same. And so anything that went in or out, express or freight that went out and came in, you can see it's a record of way bills, as they call them. These are the slips that go with the package or whatever it is, or with the car, freight car. So he was a bookkeeper and as well as an agent doing the other things. Make sure I don't miss anything here. He was also involved, let's see if this takes me, yeah, okay. This is, now, the stations up here wouldn't have been this big, but basically this is what it was like. You had your clock, that's a CP clock, so that'd be the kind that was up here. You had your telegraph key, which I'm not sure is right here, and you had your desk, and you had what they call train orders, which are what's pinned up here, and I'll explain that in a minute. Railways had what they called dispatchers at a central location. In this area, it was in Smiths Falls. They controlled trains. Other than the regular scheduled ones, they controlled trains. If a train got behind, and so where two trains meet wasn't going to be where it was intended, then the dispatcher would decide where they were going to meet. So he would, with that change, he would send a telegram to the agent, one of the agents on the line, to say, trains, whatever, they're all numbered. Train 35 will meet train 37 at this point. instead of the other point. So he'd send it to an agent ahead of the spot where he wants the two trains to meet. Oh, sorry, I forgot one of the other things too. I think this is out of order, but anyway, we'll come to that. Anyway, just these are tickets that that's one of the very early one, Ottawa and Gatineau. This is one. This one I bought just before they discontinued passenger service. This one I actually bought after, because we had an excursion. There was an excursion to Maniwaki about the next weekend, and we went in. Somebody went into the station and said, "He's got some tickets from Maniwaki to Farley. He's selling them for 50 cents." And so I went and I bought one. And he stamped it for February 3rd, and yet the passenger service ended on the 27th. So anyway, so that's a little. Anyway, so that was one of the things he sold. Now I'll get back to the other thing was he was a telegrapher. I don't know how many of you remember the telegraph poles. That's what they were. Later on, they switched from telegraph to telephone, their own system, and they'd use the same wires. That's just north of Alcove, along the river. That picture. Now, getting back to the dispatcher and the agent and all that sort of stuff. So the dispatcher would send a message to the agent by telegram. This is where your call letters come in that I showed you. They had the letters for so if you wanted Venosta, it might have been VA or something like that, the first letter, last letter. So and then the agent in Venosta would say, "Oh, that's me." So he'd pass on the word what by telegram what the new meet was supposed to be, the dispatcher. So the agent would usually type it up if he had time. If he didn't, he'd handwrite it. This is actually up to Wakefield, 1976. So this would be usually they put the engine number, but anyway, that might be a trip for 1201. I'm not sure. Anyway, so that's what an order would look like, and the dispatcher would sign it here, or the agent if he was the one that. Now, so when the train went by that station, the agent would change the semaphore, which they call it an order board, would change it to and whichever position these blades were in, would tell the train crew, the head-end crew, what they had to do. Sometimes it was just putting up a train order. It was just a signal would say slow down, and he'd actually hand it up to him. He's got a hoop here, and he'd hand it up to him as they went by, and that's how he get that order that I just showed you. And then the crew would look at it. Now on a freight, you'd have a caboose at the back end. So this guy there, you can see, you may be able to see it. There's a second hoop here. You'd also have to give one to the, so you have two copies. You'll also give one to the conductor, because he's at the back of the train, the engineer's at the front. So they both have to know what's going on. This is actually Dorval. So that's the agent actually got involved with the control of trains back then. Nowadays it's all radio. So the dispatcher in the central location will radio the train crew directly. And so that's another reason you don't have station agents or stations. And of course, he looked after the baggage and the passengers and their luggage and express, because express would go by the passenger train. And I'm not sure where that is, not up here, but anyway, that's what the wagons, the baggage carts used to look like. Now, looking at what life was like as an agent, they were somewhat, a lot of them were isolated. Casabaggio, for example, was, I don't know how many kilometers from actual Casabaggio, so it might get a little lonely there. So the railways would provide living quarters for them, just as they do here, and of course this is the same design as this station, and the living quarters would be upstairs, and sometimes a back room, as this station has. Larger centers like Maniwaki, Gracefield, Wakefield, they assumed the agent could find living quarters in the town, so they weren't equipped with the living quarters. But all the others up here were. Let's see. Now, in the earlier days, there was no electricity. So it was all kerosene, and some of the earlier pictures, I can't see it with this one, They actually can see outside a glass box that contained a kerosene lantern inside, protected it from the elements. So the railway every once in a while, I think it was once a month, and in the freight train they'd have a boxcar filled with station supplies. So the railway would provide coal for heat and maybe cooking, the forms the agent needed, and kerosene, that kind of stuff. So whatever they needed, that relating to the railway, and so that let's see. Now, one of the jobs of the agent was to maintain the grounds around the station to whatever. Some were more involved and liked to do it than others. I mean, we all know that in our lives. We have neighbors that don't look after theirs as much as others, but anyway, and some of them really got into it and actually had gardens, really nice gardens. I've seen other pictures. But the agent, for a while, now this looks like early 20s, in Chelsea, had one heck of a garden, a rose garden. And I've heard that, quite a few years ago now, that the roses are still there, where they are today, and they'd gone wild, but they were still there. So the long platform here was for commuter. They usually weren't that long. That's why they had that. So anyway, and the CP actually encouraged it. They had a garden division that provided seed, and they had gardening experts or something like that. And there was actually a contest. And yeah. I think that as far as I know, anything I've seen, Chelsea, the agent at Chelsea was the only gardener. The rest didn't have anything up here, but he certainly did. That was quite something. Kept the lawn all mowed nicely. Anyway, and I guess they were responsible for some of the maintenance too. Okay, let's look at maintenance of way. Obviously, you can't run a train on a track that's no good at all, and washouts and what have you. So you had to have a gang of people who looked after maintaining it. Most of the time, they were local people. This is a group of section people in Maniwaki, actually. I don't know who they are, but anyway. So the railway was, each railway line was divided into sections. And in those days, it was, back in the days, steam was 10 miles. That's all they could do and get back and forth, and I'll show you how they got back and forth along the tracks. And so you'd have a section foreman, that's where I mentioned about the section foreman here, and his crew of workers. And they were pretty much all local people. So this is what gave employment to the local people in the area. And it was tough work, obviously. And they were responsible for keeping the tracks level, adding ballast, replacing ties, maintaining the fence, keeping the grass cut, and any fallen trees and that kind of stuff. And this is one way they got around. It was called a velocipede, basically a three-wheel bike, tricycle, I guess you could call it. And that's how they got around, if it was just one person. The other way, with more people, I missed one here. What happened to it? Anyway, I think of all of you, the one I would have missed is a hand car. You know the one you used to do this with? And sometimes they'd also have on the back, they'd have a little extra, like one of those without the pump, and they'd have some of their tools on, like a trailer. They'd have some of their tools on it and carry that around. And then every once in a while, they'd have a shed that's connected where they could store them. And finally, they got mechanized. They had what, now the railways don't call them that, but most people call them speeders. And they had those. And then now they have what they call a high rail truck. That's where you have a pickup truck or whatever, even larger ones. And they have the special flanged wheels that drop down. And then they can go and get along the tracks that way. So that's what they use now. So the hazards of working on the railway. It was dangerous work. And as you could see with the picture of William McFall, it sometimes got really, and there were several bad accidents on the Maniwaki. Sometimes men could lose a finger or whatever, and what have you. But the worst was, of course, when you had a derailment or an accident. First of all, the one I'll mention a couple. The first one of any significance was the Stag Creek washout when the construction train just washout and this went right into into Stag Creek. 3 people were killed: an engineer, fireman, and somebody they had on that shouldn't have been on.
That's Stag Creek?
No, I'll come to this one in a minute. The next one was Will McFall when he lost his leg, and the next one after that, just south of Farleton, I know the exact spot, was where he lost his life. Yeah. Anyway, won't go into that. This is the one at Castor Lake, just north of Gracefield, in 1953. The fireman and engineer were killed. It was a passenger train. They were coming down from Maniwaki, and they were both killed. Most of the time when they were killed back in the days of steam, it was usually from being scalded by the steam. That the pipes would break, and then all the steam would come out, and that's how these 2 gentlemen died. They got scorched by the steam. Anyway, some of you may know him, Felton McConnell. Louise, do you know him? Anyway, he was brought up in Aylwin Station, and he remembers the railway. He's in the mid-90s now. He remembers the railway very well, and he actually went up. He was living in Ottawa at the time. He went up and walked up and took these pictures. So it was pretty tragic. And we went up there 15 years ago on a bicycle because the tracks weren't there anymore. Bicycle now. We found some coal down in the ditch, and a little piece of glass from one of the glass lights on the locomotive. They'd hauled everything away, but they didn't bother taking it because the tender where the coal was, they'd flipped over too. So anyway, it was very dangerous work at times. Now let's look at the public, the people of the Gatineau Valley. Now, besides passengers, carrying passengers, they obviously carried freight. And the freight was all sorts of different things, and I'll make sure I get the list of them here so you can get them all, so I don't forget anything. Okay. And as I said before, the public obviously usually dealt with the railway through the agent, so that was their connection. Okay. Let's get the right place here. Anyway, so you had agriculture products, lumber up here, of course. Even logs came down on the road. Minerals. The most recent example is Alcan Quarry at Farm Point, until that closed. And part of the agriculture supplies or things that brought to where it was livestock. Now this is down Union Pacific, that's down in the States. I didn't have one up here. But same sort of thing. And all the larger communities, I've seen a picture of Alcove, and one of these, they're all painted white, these pens right next to the tracks with a ramp. And that's how your farmers here or anywhere got their products, the livestock to market. They were put on the what everybody calls cattle cars, and away they went. And this is unusual. This is at Wakefield, obviously before the turntable, and lumber or forest, I should say forest products, were a big part of it up here for many years. Now this is unusual because here's logs going down, probably for hardwood for flooring or something like that, and they were being loaded with this makeshift crane. But then this is a northbound train, and it's got a load of lumber, so I don't know. You got lumber going up and wood going down. I don't know. You think it'd be the other way around. I'm sure it was at times, but then you had your locals, your tourists, your hunters, fishermen, and what have you, going up and using the train obviously. And of course, hunters would get their catch or get their game, and they bring them back to the city. And I found this picture in the library archives at Gracefield. So I can imagine the poor baggagemen putting this stuff. You know, I'm sure they've been dressed, cleaned, and and all that sort of stuff. But still, they still had the heads and everything else, and they had to load this onto the train. I don't know. So, But anyway, that shows that that hunters were certainly using the railway line. But the railways publicized it quite heavily. This is the Ottawa and Gatineau Railway, which was from 1894, when it became the Ottawa and Gatineau Railway instead of the Ottawa and Gatineau Valley, to 1902 when CP took over. And they had, yeah. And another pamphlet I've seen, it says the Adirondack of Canada. That's how they advertise in their pamphlet. So even CP got into it. This is from a magazine. I'm not sure what one it was, but CP actually got involved too with their own, and this is an ad that they put in the paper. Now, we had some well-known people come up to the Gatineau Valley. One of them, these are two that I know of, and I'll tell about this gentleman in a minute. Joan Crawford, the actress. She used to come up here in the 30s on a private car to Gracefield. And so they parked the private car there, and she'd go to her husband, Frank Tone, cottage at 31 Mile Lake. And apparently the family still has the cottage, his descendants. So she'd come up by her private car and would go to the cottage, and till they divorced in 1939. I looked this all up just to see when the period she was coming up. So it was during the Depression. So anyway, this gentleman is the 9th Duke of Devonshire. I don't know if you've heard of that. And he was the 11th, I don't know, I can't remember, Governor General in Canada. Canada's Governor General from 1916 to 1921. So he liked the great outdoors, he liked fishing and what have you, so he bought land at Blue Sea Lake and he built a summer place, cottage to him maybe. And so how did you get up? You went up by train. And of course, Governor General had to go in style. And that's the actual car that was used. There's one story about him coming up, and the cottage wasn't quite finished, and it was in the fall, I think. So instead of going and staying over at the cottage, he stayed in that, and they parked it at Blue Sea Village, at the station at Blue Sea Village, and that's where he stayed overnight, or whatever number of nights. So that was actually built by the railway for the government, for the Governor General, and so whoever replaced him would have used it as well. It was called the Alexandra. So he obviously traveled in style. Now, the first cars that were the company bought, they bought them from a company in Delaware, the Jackson Sharp, and there were two but back then there were two classes of passenger service. You get first class and second class. This was a second class car. Open platform at the end, and you can see so they'd have a heater. A little stove at one end, maybe only one end. Sometimes I think they had them at two ends. I don't think there's any washrooms, so make sure you took care of it before you got on the train. Which reminds me, the stations often back then had privies, and that's what the passengers used, and I presume the station agents. So this place would have had one just sitting over wherever. Anyway, so that's the second class outside, and there's the second class inside. Nice long slatted bench seats. No cushions there. Now, I couldn't find a picture of a first class. The state of Delaware has the builder's collection. That's where I found it. The builder of these cars has their photographic collection. That's where I found it. But I didn't find any of the first class coaches. Anyway, they had gas lighting. There'd be a little tank at the bottom. And finally got a little more up to date. Now, this is maybe a little classier than what was brought up here. Most of the passenger cars up here, even into the 50s, were wood-sided. And they may have had rattan seats, but they were very much like that, just not as cushy. And again, they still had the gas lights over the top. And the conductor of the train would come through and light them when needed. And that was your comfort. Then after they lost the mail contract, once the railway lost the mail contract in 1957, when the firemen and I guess just the firemen went on strike, so everything ground to a halt. The post office tried trucks, and they never went back. And a lot of these branch line passenger services were viable for the railroad because of the mail contract. Once they lost it, so they stopped using the standard train, baggage car, mail car, and passenger car, and went initially to these. And I rode behind one of these. They had trailers too, so they could double up. And I rode behind one of these in 1958, I guess. I can still remember the ugly front on them. Anyway, so they used those for a short period of time up here. No air conditioning or anything like that. And they were noisy and smelly, apparently. Finally, and a lot of you may have seen this, what the CP called Dayliner, self-propelled, engine underneath, and the front vestibule was where the engineer, and they didn't have a fireman. They didn't need one, so and there's the old shed that was at Maniwaki, and that's what they closed the service with. And they were pretty good. I rode it once or twice, and it wasn't bad. And I actually did one time get a chance to ride up in the front. And as we were going through, you couldn't go very fast in this line, except around the Casbagio area where it's really straight. And the engineer who was at one I mentioned, Bill Austin, he was known as Wild Bill to other crew. And he was hitting 89. So he was going, and that's one of these. So now they had different versions. Most of the ones had just one baggage door here, and the other had windows here. That was a more standard one.
Did they pull freight with them?
No. As a matter of fact, they would not pull a passenger train or like a passenger car with it. That other one I just showed you, they could pull another car behind, but not these. No. So if you had a second one, it would be also self-propelled, and its engine would be running as well, but it would be controlled from the front. So, anyway, with that, that pretty much gives you a general idea of the flavor and what life was like for everybody back when. So, I should mention that the decline started in the 60s, and by 1970, freight service was as required. There was a customer up here needed a train, they sent it up. Before that, it was regular scheduled. Up Monday, down Tuesday, up Wednesday, down Thursday, up Friday, down Saturday, down being back to Ottawa. And it just got so light, and then finally. So, so that's when the decline started. Anyway, any questions?
I was curious. You showed us the picture of the coal loading the coal
Yep.
in Maniwaki.
Yeah.
Were the other stations, did they have coal and water stations?
No, they didn't need it because it could make it all the way up. Where they had the water was at Cascades, which eventually ended up with a steel tank, tower, and Blue Sea, which I showed you, which was an enclosed tank. Tank was inside, and they heated it. The agent would be heating it and then keep it heated in the winter. Yeah, and I'm not sure the steel tanks, I'm not sure how they kept that heated. But anyway, so that's all they had. Originally they did have one at Maniwaki. A tower, with like the one I showed you, the wood one. But towards the end, they were able to, they probably had a standpipe, as they called it, and they got water from the town later on at Maniwaki. So they'd fill it up then, and then I think the one at Cascade and Blue Sea would be for the freight train primarily, because they'd be stopping and going, shunting cars and what have you, so they'd run out of water before they got to Ottawa, so they'd have it there to fill. And the very early days, I remember I've seen a picture, pardon me, of Wakefield, and there's a tank there, just south of the present station, right next to the river. So they must have had them elsewhere at times, but later on when the tanks and the tenders got bigger, they didn't need it. So,
There is a cistern in the basement here, and that was for the water.
yeah.
And we cut open one wall so that to make it into
Oh,
storage.
that wouldn't have been for the locomotives, though.
No?
No. Now they had one at Aylwin Station in a pinch for mostly the freight trains. There was the Felton McCon told me where he lived. I mentioned there was a stream up a hill from the west of the tracks. And the railway actually built a standpipe, a pipe, and in an emergency, they could get water there. So every once in a while, but that was the only other place, and there was no tank there. You wouldn't know about it. So anyway.
Where would they do the servicing?
Maniwaki. Yeah, but the big servicing would be in Ottawa, of course, at the Roundhouse, because they had equipment to do it. But the greasing, as I showed you, we're greasing there. Any light duty. What happened at Maniwaki when the train came up? They turned the train along with the well, not the freight, but the passenger train. They turned the train on the Y. You know what a Y is? Everybody know what a Y is?
No.
No? Okay, all right. Yeah, I'll do this way. You have the track here, and you want to turn your train. So you have a track come up like this, the shape of Y, and then like this. So you come in, this is your front of the train, you go up here, and you go back like this, now the train's going the other way. Okay? So it's spelled W-Y-E. So if they didn't have a turntable, that's what they used. And with a turntable, you can only turn the locomotive. You had the whole passenger train to turn it, take you all night to turn it. So they'd use a Y like that. And Maniwaki had one. And anyway, so it'd all be done. And you wanted to keep the fire going in the locomotive. So they'd have a night watchman, and he'd keep adding a little bit of coal just to keep the pressure up and to keep the fire going all night. And then the crew came on next morning, and it was all they had to do was boost it up more and get up to the pressure they wanted. Say 250 pounds, that's what 1201 was, 250 pounds per square inch. And then they take off. So that was that kind of servicing that was done in Maniwaki.
How did they acquire the land for the railway in the first place?
It was purchased from the landowners, and maybe a lot of it back then, further north, was Crown land still. The right-of-way is 60 feet wide. Sorry for those who are in metric. And from the center of the track to one fence was 30 feet, and then 30 feet. So it's 60 feet wide. So that's how they would have had to do it. Just buy it from the various. Back then, of course, everybody wanted the railway, so I don't think anybody would say, "I'm not selling to you," and your neighbors wouldn't have liked you either.
Yeah. And does the railway still own that land?
Municipalities owned it. Yeah, yeah.
I wonder why, like, with the development of the railway and like the CPR trying to settle so much of the prairies in Ottawa moving west,
yeah.
Why weren't they, like, and I've seen so many advertisings in the past too during my studies, but I don't see as many advertising of trying to settle Ottawa north, like, and this property. And this
well, of course, a lot of it was settled, whereas all that advertising to get settlers to farm on the prairies,
yeah.
They were trying to get it. This was already settled by the time the railway got here. Okay. And now, interesting enough, the original company intended to build to James Bay from Maniwaki. Wow. CP actually kept that as part of the charter. See, remember they leased the railway, so the company still existed. And in the charter, they kept that they wanted to build to James Bay until the Depression. So that's how long and how they would do that. And anyway, another. Hey, Michael.
Can you explain flag stations?
Ah, yes, flag stations. Obviously, all I mentioned were the bigger stations with agents or caretakers, but as you all know, particularly up here, there were lots of stops, and they had flag stations. And where they got that name was there's no agent, nobody there, and but the railway would provide a flag in the station, and then you would grab that and hear the train coming, and you'd wave at the head-end crew to stop. Now, I have an experience with that. Elder Station, which is at Blue Sea Lake, just south of Messines. When I was a kid, we were sending somebody home, a friend of my sister's, home on the train, and we were going to flag the train at Ellard. And we went in, and this is the sort of later days of the rail. We weren't really looking after these things. So we went inside, and there's no flag. So this young girl, had her luggage. So my father, I can remember, he went in and he found, I don't know, a handkerchief or something, and took it out of her suitcase and went like that. Stopped the train. It worked. So But that time, I'm sure he may have, if he went like that, he probably would have anyway. But Dad went ahead and found something they could use actually as a flag. So, and they were all, most of them were what they call portable. They were narrow, so they could lift them and put them onto a flat car and move them elsewhere. And up and down the Gatineau Valley, they were moved. Some of them were moved several times. There's one in Lordsvale, which is at Farleton, and it was actually a little bit further south and called it another name. I can't remember what it is now. And it was moved just a little bit further north, I guess to serve more people, or there was a better road crossing, and whatever. I'm not sure, but so they were portable and they could be moved around. So anyway, that's why they're called flag stations.
They
Don't hold you up to them.
Most of the trains, especially the early ones, did they have whistles or bells? Did they have bells?
Both.
Both.
I think they had them right from the get-go. Yeah, certainly since 1891 when they finished to Wakefield. That was the first section they finished up here was 1891. They had it by then, and they also had a bell. The railways used the bell to warn people nearby, and for signaling each other, they'd use a whistle, or for crossings they'd use a whistle. So they had like. Let's see, two toots was we're starting to move if we're stopped. 3 toots was if we're moving, we're stopping. So that would tell the crew. So they actually use it as a signal to the crew. So that's when they use the whistle. But if they were starting up at a station, they would just start ringing the bell to warn everybody around we're moving. So the public wouldn't know what the signals were. Yes?
Bruce, I saw a original picture of the Venosta train station here. It's on actually the Gatineau Valley Historical Society Archives. And there's more than one set of tracks out in front. Is that a Y that was here?
No, that was a siding. They had two sidings. They had the mainline track. They had another one, and then another one. And the one beside the main line would be the passing track. That's where if a train, remember I mentioned, had to meet. They had to meet at Venosta, or one of them would go in there. The railway called them, the one train would go in the hole. And they go in there and wait for that train to go by. The other one was what they call a team track. That's for their customers. And they call it team track probably because the customers would bring their goods to go, or their farm products to go wherever, with a team of horses. So I think that's where that came. But it was always, the railway always called them team tracks. Now, occasionally you would have somebody with a factory, or up here maybe they used to have at Marks they had a pit. They call it Marks Pit, and it would have had a siding like a spur into the pit, separate from the other. Matter of fact, there wasn't any station there of any. I think it was a flag station. That's all. So you might have that occasionally, but for the most part, you had the 2 extra tracks, one for the passing, and one for people bringing their products and stuff.
When would they have taken those out? Do you have any idea?
They weren't taken out till the railway was torn up.
Okay.
For the most part. There might have been some spots, I think Farm Point probably had sidings, and I think they probably took them out early because there was absolutely no business there anymore. Right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
I'm
you.
enjoying this.